that you are able to not solve the question, which part of it is something that confuses you. That is how you will end up improving slowly. Okay, so please don't get demotivated, or please don't think about that I'm scoring less marks or high marks. In the initial part of the test series, this is just for you to acclimatize yourself for sitting through those 2 hours and applying your mind continuously for those 2 hours, right? So, and for geography, I hope that those of you who would have studied climatology in general in slight greater detail, and also some part of the physiography, you would have had a kind of an easy time. Good. Yes, the discussion carried on for 5 hours. I understand that, but still. Right. Now, when coming back to the topic now here, when we talk about places of origin and place of destination, what do we mean by that? Suppose there is an individual who lives in, let's say, any part of the country. Let's consider West Bengal as an example, northern part of West Bengal. Thereby, that person ends up deciding to shift to a place of Mumbai, either on a permanent or on a semi-permanent basis. Semi-permanent basis means what? Maybe for a few months, maybe for a few years, and so on. So that individual, let's name that individual. I'll take any one of your, or rather than taking any of your names, let's take the case of A, right? Now, A is an individual who has moved from West Bengal to Mumbai. Now, there might be and there must be certain factors prevalent in West Bengal which would not have suited his or her requirements in life conditions, etc. And that is something which pushed that person from that place of origin. So those factors are referred to as push factors. Then you might have had certain conditions prevalent in Mumbai due to which that person A decided to shift there. Otherwise, that person could have gone to Kolkata in West Bengal itself. That person could have gone to Delhi. That person could have migrated to Chennai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, any other place. But that person decided to move to Mumbai. So that means Mumbai must have certain factors which would have pulled that person towards that destination. So when we talk about a place of destination, here comes certain pull factors. Right? Now, these push factors and pull factors, what are those? So here broadly, again, you can categorize them into 3 categories. That is the geographical factors, then economic factors, as well as social or socio-cultural factors. Under geographical factors, again, you can take the case of, for example, the perfect climatic conditions, right? You have climate, then you have availability of, let's say, water, proper and suitable topography. For example, here I take you back again into the pages of history. When we talk about, I'm sure all of you would have known that the Mughals during the time of Akbar, they spent a lot of money and constructed a kind of a small city near Agra in Fatehpur Sikri, right? How many of you have visited, or how many of you know where Fatehpur Sikri is? I am sure you would have had some idea about where Fatehpur Sikri is, right? Good. So Fatehpur Sikri was a place where establishment of that city, construction of that city took a lot of resources. Now, after spending so many millions of dollars at that point of time, in those values of currency at that point of time, you would be very intrigued to know that the entire region was vacated within 70 days. And why was that? Because after going to Fatehpur Sikri, it was realized that that place did not have a regular water supply. So water was present in a kind of a scarce situation because Fatehpur Sikri is situated on a hillock, so on a kind of a hill. So that is why within 70 days, everyone migrated from there. So water availability, climatic conditions, agricultural factors, these become very important in terms of pushing person from one particular region into another region. Here, in the relevant day and age, you also have the factor of climate change now. Climate change. This factor of climate change, as you would study in the case of environment and ecology, if you have not already studied, climate change is also pushing up migration unlike anything. Many of the farmers who are situated or who are living in the coastal areas across the globe, they are facing floods due to the seawater coming inwards. Now, due to the seawater coming inwards, that creates its own sets of troubles, its own sets of issues, due to which you have a kind of a salinity conditions present on the farmland which cannot support any further crops. Take the case of Sundarbans Delta. Historically, for hundreds of years, many farmers have lived in that Sundarban deltaic region and they have been growing rice. But then, because of climate change, the incidences of coastal floodings have increased quite drastically, due to which you have a condition that farm failure and crop failure in that region is very prevalent. So as a result of that, as a consequence to that, people are migrating from that area to work as landless laborers somewhere else. Take the case, for example, in the region of Syria. Now, the region of Syria, even though in news for all the wrong reasons regarding the civil war, regarding the terrorist organizations, regarding fundamentalist organizations which start functioning there. But Syria is a region which again has suffered the impact of climate change, due to which the crops are failing. And for the past 15 years, many years have been the drought years, due to which the crops have failed, as a result of which the income has failed. Now, due to that, people again are forced to migrate. They are forced to migrate where? They are forced to migrate to other areas where they can find some economic avenue. So economic factors in terms of earnings, in terms of income, that becomes very relevant. And then you have the socio-cultural factors. Socio-cultural factors here, for example, many people, in their old age, they want to live closer to their places of worship, the places of reverence. You'll find endless number of people in our country itself who end up migrating, let's say, to Haridwar, to Allahabad, or to regions such as Varanasi, even Ujjain, Ajmer. Why? In order to be closer to areas where they hold a kind of a special reverence. But then socio-cultural factors here don't only refer to the places of reverence. They also talk about the societal existence. Now, people always tend to prefer to live in those areas where the society is much more open. For example, let's say this person A in itself, that person A belongs from a very backward or a kind of a rural area in northern Bengal, let's say, where that person A faced a lot of caste discrimination. It happens in our country. That is a reality. It is not only in the case of West Bengal, but almost in all the parts of the country. In the rural hinterlands, you face a lot of caste-based discrimination. Now, once that person migrates, let's say, to Mumbai or to Delhi or to Bangalore, thereby you don't have to keep a track of your caste equation anymore. Whatever you work, you earn accordingly, and you are free to choose your own line of work in these areas. So that again, wherever the society is much more open, people tend to move to that area. Example here, take the case of Afghanistan. Now, immediately after the NATO troops pulled out of Afghanistan last year, you would have witnessed a kind of a sort of inhuman efforts to migrate out from Afghanistan. Why? Because people were afraid of what is about to follow, a kind of a social constriction, a kind of a social restriction. So that is where people wanted to migrate out of that. Similar is the case in the place of Myanmar, where you do have the Rohingyas who have been oppressed in that particular region. So the societal conditions for Rohingyas in Myanmar is not very conducive, is not very encouraging, due to which people in that region are migrating out of that place. So always people will tend to move to those areas where there is a widespread social acceptance, where the society is much more open. Okay, so this is basically one of those aspects where migration is something which comes into play. Okay, now then yes, wars will also come under that category, but then wars, they are mostly temporary in nature. But yes, wars also push up a large amount of migrant and migration crisis, as well as was observed in the case of, and is being observed in the case of, recent Russia-Ukraine crisis which has ensued. Okay, cost of living will come under the economic factors itself. Now, migration overall, if you look at the process of migration and the regions from where people are migrating, the regions where people are migrating to, you'll find that basically it is done from rural to urban areas, urban to rural areas, one urban area to another urban area, and that too again either on a permanent basis or on a semi-permanent basis. In the case of this particular map, you will observe a very clear depiction of where people are migrating from. So you will find the region of eastern UP, Bihar, as well as North Bengal. People are migrating out of that place. Rajasthan, western Rajasthan, you'll find people are migrating out of this place. Even Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, here you will observe a kind of a seasonal migration. When the tourism season starts during the conditions or during the summer time, people tend to move back to these areas because they get an economic opportunity. But whenever the winter season comes, that economic opportunity dries up, due to which they migrate to the plain areas. Okay. Now, even in the case of coastal Odisha, then here, Kerala. Kerala is another one of those states where you have a lot of people migrating out of Kerala. Now, why is that? Despite the fact that Kerala boasts for close to around 100% literacy rate, why is it that people will migrate? That is because the economic opportunities are not that prevalent. And people from Kerala, they end up migrating to Middle Eastern countries, to Gulf nations, etc., to work as blue-collar laborers, to work as healthcare workers, construction workers, etc. So that is where people end up migrating from one region to another based upon many push factors as well as pull factors which are prevalent. Okay. Now, if a question is asked regarding this migration, you have to understand that when you explain it, you have to explain each one of them with suitable examples. For example, the geographical factors. What are the geographical factors? What are the economic factors? What are the socio-economic and socio-cultural factors? All that you have to explain and elaborate, and you can very easily frame an answer out of that. Okay? Chinmay, I gave the example of Sundarbans in Bangladesh. Much of that deltaic region is getting spoiled. As a result of that, people are migrating out of that. Okay. Place of origin is not similar to place of birth. Place of origin refers to the region from where people are migrating away. That is the place of origin. Okay. Now, then when we talk about India and Indian population, India's population is something which is measured every 10 years in an exercise whereby we end up carrying out a detailed counting methodology, which is referred to as census. It is carried out every 10 years. Last time it was carried out was in 2011. Before that, 2001. Before that, 1991, 81, 71, 61, 51, 41, and so on. Every 10 years, we take a count of the total population which is in existence. Now here, we have to understand that this census, even though the latest census was supposed to be released in 2021, but because of COVID pandemic and so on, this exercise has been delayed, and chances are that the census figures will be released sometime mid next year or even at the end of next year. Whenever these census figures are released, always leave everything else, study about those census figures, study about the sex ratio, study about, for example, the infant mortality rate, etc. All those factors you have to pay attention to. Why? Because UPSC keeps on asking questions from that census at least for 4 to 5 years. So that is where you will get a lot of fodder material which UPSC is going to utilize when the latest census figures and the latest census data comes out. It is supposed to be released sometime next year, maybe by mid-year or year-end, so pay attention to that. But as per estimates of United Nations, presently our population is close to around 1.4 billion people. 1.4 billion is our population count. We are going to exceed the population count, and we are going to overtake China in terms of population very soon. Within the next 10 years or within the next decade, we are going to overtake China in the form of most populous country across the globe. Okay? Now here, India's population is equivalent to close to around 18% of the global population. It is estimated that India's population growth is something which is going to peak by the year 2047. And after that, we are going to experience a kind of a population decline. Now, 35% of our population is urban and around 65% of our population is still rural. 65% of our population is rural. Okay, so still that means, and most of the rural population that we have, majority of them are involved in agriculture. So that is where the rural issues is something that even you guys have to pick up, whether you are reading it for economy, whether you are studying polity, whether you are studying any other subject. The rural issues are something that you need to pick up, because when you have majority of the population living in the rural centers, that means the problems faced there are the problems faced by the country at large. So that is where you have to be mindful of the issues that the rural centers pose in front of us. Population density as per the last census is around 464 people per square kilometer, which is significantly higher, but then the latest census data is going to reveal a number which is expected to be much more than this. Okay? Now, here, when we talk about the population growth rate, the various different census data. Now, the Britishers, they started carrying out this census data since the 1800s itself, the later part of 1800s. Now here, and that is something you will study in modern history again. Now here, when we talk about the census data for the past century, other than one particular exception, that is in 1921, that is the decade from 1911 to 1921, you'll find that basically the population has increased. It is only during this decade and this census where we experienced a decline in population. And why is it that we experienced a decline in population? The answer is very simple. This was the era in this decade from 1914 to 1918. We had the First World War. Lot of Indians and lot of young members as well as old age population, they went for that war effort. Many of them did not come back. And at that point of time in this decade, you also had the pandemic, that was the Spanish flu, which claimed many lives in India as well. Also, to add to that, you had conditions of famine. Famine conditions existed in that decade, and you had 2 to 3 years of very severe famine conditions. Famine means what? You have an absolute scarcity of food, so people die as a result of starvation due to lack of food. So because of these famine conditions, again, many people, they lost their lives. So because of these extra factors, you had a decline in population. But again, the population started picking up, the population started increasing. Here, if you are to observe a particular kind of trend, you will observe that up till around 1950 or 1941 to 51, you'll find that as the Britishers, they were still existent, at that point of time, population grew in a kind of a normal rate. But the Britishers went away, the oppression reduced, availability of food increased, and medical facilities also started being available for normal and regular Indians. That is when, from the 60s almost up till the 80s and the decade of the 80s, that is when we experienced a kind of a population explosion. Population explosion. Now, why did this population explode immediately after independence? That was because people now could earn something, and obviously when you are able to earn something, and also the government had done a tremendous amount of work in providing medical facilities, in providing food grains. This was the era of green revolution at its prime, and thereby a lot of people got an opportunity to have enough food on their table, which in itself was a kind of a scarce situation during the British tenure. So medical facilities, availability of food, economic avenues, all of that increased the population. Young ones, the young children, they did not die anymore at that particular rate. Why? Because they had available medicines which were given to them. After that, the growth rate still continued, but then the growth rate slightly reduced. The growth rate slightly stagnated. Now, it is expected that even in 2021 or 2022, whenever, up till whichever cutoff date that population exercise is carried out, it is expected that the population would increase, but that growth rate which was experienced from 60s to the 80s and 80s, that is something which is not going to be repeated. Now our population growth has almost stabilized. It has not reached the stability as of now, but the growth rate, that growth rate has started stabilizing. The population is still increasing, but that growth rate is stabilizing. I hope you understand the subtle difference between the two. Population is still increasing, but that growth rate, that has stabilized. Okay? Now here, there is a kind of a transition that any society, any country ends up exhibiting as they move from one particular state of society where the society is, let's say, illiterate, where you don't have that much availability of education, where you don't have that much availability of medical facilities, you don't have that much availability of economic factors. So you will find that when the society in itself is not very developed, the population growth rate is very high. Why? Because at that point of time, the families, they themselves, they are not well to do economically, so they always want more kids. One of the reason is that they are not sure how many of these kids will grow up to be healthy adults, because many of them, they tend to lose their life due to lack of medical facilities. And also, they want more and more people and more of their children to contribute economically. That is the reason why there comes a kind of a preference to the male child, right? Why? Because they think that when you have a male child, they will contribute economically. even though that thought process is completely flawed, it is completely incorrect, but still, when the society in itself is backward, it is not developed. That is the thought process which follows. So when at the society is rural, agrarian, and illiterate, there generally you will end up finding high birth and high death rate. But then, slowly and steadily, as people get aware, and they get the information and they get the required awareness that if you have more children, not only is it unhealthy for the mothers in itself if you have children at without the proper time period in which the mother's body they can basically recharge the nourishment within themselves. So for the health of the mother as well, it is not always encouraged to have those many kids at those small intervals. So awareness comes, literacy comes, and a kind of an economic empowerment comes, education comes, then automatically you'll find that the families, they have lesser number of kids, right? So that is something you can, even in your own area, wherever you are living, whichever part of the country you are living in, if you ask your grandparents how many brothers and sisters they had, how many siblings they had, and you compare it with your generation, you will find that at that point of time, they used to have many siblings as compared to your generation, right? So automatically, when the society becomes industrial and literate, the birth rate and the death rate both reduces, because now the medical facilities are available. Now even if you have two kids, those two kids will end up growing to be healthy adults, so you don't need to have 5 kids in order to compensate for that. So birth rate reduces. Availability of medical facilities means the death rate reduces. At the time of independence, at the time of around 1947 to 1950, the average life expectancy in India was close to around how much? Around 30 to 32 years. Around, in between, to be more precise, between 27 to 32 years. Now, over a period of time, now we have 65 plus years. So every individual is expected to live at least on an average around 65 years. So when you have people growing up as healthy adults, that brings about a generational change in mindset. So after a generation, after 1 or 2 generations, when people find out that yes, everybody is growing up as healthy adults, they will have lesser number of kids. And that is when the growth rate also stabilizes, the growth rate stagnates. This is what is referred to as demographic transition. Now, what do we mean by demography? Demography basically refers to any kind of qualitative and quantitative study of population. When we study the population, we study it in form of, let's say, sex ratio, that is the percentage of male to female population. We study it in the terms of literacy rate, how many of the or what portion and percentage of the adult population they are literate. We study them on the basis of, let's say, when we talk about the demography, we study them under what age bracket do we have greater amount of population. So that is demography. As of now in our country, we have close to around 65% of population below 35 years. 65% of our population is below 35 years, which means what? We have a youthful population. All these people, all of us, all of you, lines used to be close to around 600 centimeters or 0.6 are very narrow. That means the wheels have to be very close to each other. That means the railway bogies or the coaches will have to be very small. That means the carrying capacity will be less. That means the speed will also be less. So this earlier one was used to be referred to as narrow gauge. narrow gauge. Now, slowly it was found out that if we increase the distance between them, the carrying capacity as well as the speed factor increases. That is when the meter gauge came in. Meter gauge. Now, meter gauge. Here, the distance between the rail tracks should be 1 meter. That also existed for a long period of time. But now we have the broad gauge. Majority of our railway networks now, they have a broad gauge. Why? Because when you increase the distance between the wheels, that means the entire system will be able to carry more amount of load, isn't it? Take the case of India. Those of you who are unable to think about it, those of you who are unable to imagine it, when you ride on an auto rickshaw, the wheels are very close to each other and the wheels are small as well. Now, if the same wheels, in the case of a tractor, they are far away, the carrying capacity increases, the speed also increases. So that is where the speed factor, stability factor, load carrying capacity, all of this increases. So in the broad gauge, now the distance is 1.67 meter. Ayush, sadly, my dear friend, that is not the formula for speed. Speed is not mass into velocity. What you have written is momentum. Speed is different. Okay, so please don't write that in the exam. Now 1.67 is the broad gauge. So that is where you have the wider distance. Earlier it used to be narrow gauge, then meter gauge. In India, we have all these three different types of gauge lengths which still exist, which brings about a lot of inefficiencies. The rail or the bogie, the engines which are moving on a narrow gauge, they can't move in a broad gauge. The ones which are moving in the broad gauge, they can't move in a meter gauge. Ideally, what you should have? You should have the same type of rail link all across the country. So that is where in the early 90s, you had the project Unigauge, which was launched by the government of India, the Sarkar-e-Hind, which is so very famous for implementing all the infrastructure projects. We launched that project Unigauge way back in 1992-93. The aim was to convert all the different gauge types into broad gauge. Now you have been the citizens of the country. You have grown up in this country. You know how the system works. Do you think this project has been completed? What is your realistic expectation here? Obviously, the project has not been completed. However, it is said that by the year 2025, we are going to achieve that. But unless and until we achieve that, keep your fingers crossed and keep your hopes high. Let's see when we achieve that and when we reach this kind of efficiency. Okay? Now, when we talk about water transport is very cheap. Why? If you apply scientific logic here, the scientific logic is that, look, when an object is moving over water, it does not face a lot of resistance, right? It ends up moving significantly. So that is why even if you provide the slightest push, the boats will move. So that is where it is very cheap. You can almost close to around, whereas the oceanic waterways are where you make use of the oceanic waters. So this is about international transportation. Transport. Yes, Shraddha, that is why it will be economical. That is what I said. Now, this is basically the aspect of oceanic waterways. It will be having the international transportation which will be available. Now here, when we talk about inland waterways, India has around 14,500 kilometers of waterways which are navigable. Navigable means where you can move by boats. Obviously, when you have, even in the plateaus, water and stream coming down from a rocky and a hilly area, you cannot move by boat there, can you? Similar in the case of Himalayas, when you have rivers crisscrossing the mountains, you cannot have boats there. So navigable means those stretches of water bodies where you can move by boat. So you have 14,500 kilometers of navigable waterways. Now, here this includes rivers, canals, channels, everything. Now, the aspect of national waterways, this was something which was initiated by the Britishers themselves. Now, the Britishers at that point of time, they had said that we will have 6 different inland waterways where you can move, and we will develop those waterways. For almost close to a century, we had only those 6 waterways, and those were also not fully utilized. Recently, owing to our competition that we see across the globe, where China is moving close to around 7 to 8% of its goods through inland waterways. Europe is moving close to around 7.5% of its goods through inland waterways. United States is again moving close to around 8% of its goods through inland waterways. India has started working upon developing of national waterways. Now, how many national waterways do we have? The number? This has increased drastically. Very good, Pavitran. So that is where we have now 111 inland waterways, right? That is something which is catered by Inland Waterway Authority of India. Now, do you need to learn all of this? No. You need to keep a track of the first 5, 6. So the first or the most important national waterway is National Waterway 1 across River Ganga from Allahabad all the way to Haldia. National Waterway 2, Brahmaputra from Sadia to Dhubri. Right? Sadia is where it enters the plain region, if you remember. Then National Waterway 3 across the Malabar coastline. National Waterway 4 across Godavari, Krishna, and the canals up till Kaveri. This is something which is still being constructed. National Waterway 5, Brahmani, and the northern Sarkar Deltaic region in Odisha. Then National Waterway 6 in River Barak. Out of this, 1 and 2, there the construction has been accelerated quite significantly. There is a lot of benefit accruing because of national waterways or inland waterway transportation. Your transportation cost drastically reduces. And when the transportation cost reduces means what? The final price at which you are able to sell your product, that will come down. And that means your products become much more competitive. When your product becomes more competitive, people will buy your products from outside the world as well. And that is when your exports will go up. When the exports go up and your products are being bought, let's say someone in Allahabad is producing a product in a small scale industry. Thereby, his product can be transported from Allahabad to Haldia and from Haldia to anywhere in the world by oceanic waterway. So that is where the economic growth of the country can happen. That is where inland waterways have been significantly worked upon in all the major developing areas of the globe. Economic integration has happened due to the development of inland waterways. Right? Now, oceanic travel, we have around 12 to 13 major ports and almost around 185 minor ports which are present in the country. Ideally, you should be knowing all the major ports. There are not many. Start from either west or east. If you start from west, this is also the northernmost port that India has. That is the Kandla port or the Deen Dayal Upadhyay port. Then in Mumbai, the JNPT, Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust, and the Nhava Sheva, both of them. Then in Goa, you have Panji, Marmagao, Mangalore, oil port, right? Then you have Kochi, which also serves as a defense port. Then Tuticorin, Chennai, Ennore, Vishakhapatnam, Paradeep, and Haldia. These are the major ports. This is something you should be knowing. Okay, this is something you should be aware of, all these ports. Now, when we talk about the advantages that a inland water transport or in general water transport gives us, first of all, the advantages are significant because it is cheap. Why it is cheap? Because in the same or cost to transport 1 ton over 1 kilometer, you will find that almost you have rupees 2.28 which is involved in road transport, rupees 1.41 in the rail transport. But for transporting 1 ton over 1 kilometer, you will need to spend only around rupees 1.19 or 1.2 for the waterways. Similarly, it is environmentally friendly. 1 liter of fuel can help you move 24 tons by a truck, right? It can help you move around 85 tons by rail. But in the case of water, it can help you move more than 100 tons of goods over water body. So that is where it is environmentally friendly. It is also cheaper. The prospect in India is significant. In India, despite having so limited number of road length, you have 65% of the goods moved by road, 27% by rail, and only 0.5% by water. This is where countries like China, countries like United States, and the entire European region, they have reduced their product pricing because they are able to move their goods significantly. Close to around 7 to 8% of their freight goods, they are moved by waterways. Okay? So this is basically the aspect of the advantages. Now, when we talk about the overseas ports or the general ports, the coastal areas that they have, ports also, based upon the functionality, the purpose that they solve, the ports also are of different types. You have the oil port. This is where you have the ports which are used for import and export of oil. So in these ports, generally you will find that if this is the port area or the shoreline, you will have large pipelines which extend into the sea, right? You have large pipelines which extend into the sea. So a ship can come here and they don't need to come significantly inland, and they can transport or transfer the oil significantly. Example of this, you have Mangalore. Mangalore port is example of this. Then you have ports of call. Ports of call, many of the times they give you a kind of pathway or an entry point into that larger area. Or many of the, for example, if you take the case of Rotterdam port in Europe, Rotterdam, where is it situated? Which country? Let me see. Good, Shreya. Very good. It is in Netherlands, right? So when you have the Rotterdam port in that region, so Rotterdam port, what will it help in? That allows you access to Europe. So that will be a port of call for Europe. Okay. Similar, in many of the cases, port of call also refers to those areas where the ships oftentimes they take a break in order to recharge, replenish their stock supplies, and then carry on for a larger journey. That also sometimes is depicted as a port of call. So here you can give the example of JNPT in Mumbai. National Biosphere. Guys, I hope you are not expecting biosphere reserves and national parks to be covered here. If you are expecting that, you are in for a very rude shock. That is for environment and ecology. JNPT in Mumbai. Good, Pavitran. Very good. You have Colombo. Right? So all these basically are ports of call. Then ferry ports. For example, you have Dover Port. Now, what is a ferry port? I hope we are aware of what is a ferry. Ferry is that kind of a vessel which moves at a very slow pace, where you have passenger carrying capacity as well as vehicle carrying capacity. So let's say you have two places. And here you have water in between. And this is a land. This is a land, very close quarters. So here you drive with your vehicle by the road, and you come here, you sit in a ferry, you get your vehicle there as well. The ferry will carry you to the other port, and that is when you will be able to drive again with your vehicle after unloading from that boat. So that is what is a ferry port in general. Okay, across the English Channel, you have the Dover port. On the side of UK, you have the port of Calais. On the side of France, that allows you to move. It is a kind of a roll-on, roll-off port in general. Okay. Then, yes, Istanbul port is also one of those. Then you have naval ports, especially for the utility of navy and the naval forces, warships, submarines, etc. So one of the largest naval ports in India, you have Karwar in the western coast. You have Cochin, again on the western coast. You have Vishakhapatnam. These are major naval ports which exist. Okay, so this is the ports of call are those which tend to give you access to that area. For example, Rotterdam port in the case provides you access to Europe. JNPT in Mumbai provides you access to India as well. So Colombo provides you access to Sri Lanka. That is a port of call. And also in many of the cases, you have the case where these ports of call are utilized by the ships in order to recharge and replenish their supplies while they engage in larger journeys, larger travels. That is port of call. Ferry ports are those where you end up moving over a very short distance, and those ferries, they help you move your vehicles as well as passengers at a slow speed from one coastal area to the other. It is a short distance travel port. Okay. Naval ports is for navy. That is what is naval ports are for. Right? Now, then we'll come to the portion of maps. How to, yes, Bharuch port is also an example of a ferry port. Good. Now, we'll come to maps. How to cover and study maps is something we shall be taking a look on. But yes, I'll give you a break. I'll not be so harsh on you. So let's take a break. And I hope we join after the break as well. Today is going to be the last session. If basically we are done with in time. Here, I won't be following a strategy where, again, I'm sorry if I disappoint you in that. I won't be following a strategy that, see, this is Rockies, mark it out. This is Andes, mark it out. I will be telling you all the major areas, the mineral distribution across the globe, the global mineral distribution, industrialized areas. That is something I will get you. But I will give you an idea about how to study maps, how to approach this mapping portion. While I interacted with you, many of you, I got a chance to interact yesterday at the offline center in Delhi. There also, I found many of you have the problem regarding map pointing. So that is something I'm going to address. And basically, we will try to formulate a strategy about how to engage in the process of revision in a productive manner. Okay, so how to go for revision, what are the areas and the materials that you can refer to. That is what we will cover. And that is where I'll end the torture for you guys. And that is where the geography session will be ended today. Okay, so let's take a break and let's return after a break in around 10 minutes. Portion of maps. Right. So here, when we talk about maps, we'll talk about how to study maps, how to approach maps. But before that, a couple of moments again for a humble gratitude from my side for all of you who have been very patient enough since the first session itself. And many of you, despite the fact that few of your questions have not been replied to, few of your questions have not been answered to, you have been kind enough and you have been patient enough. So for that, I cannot thank you enough for that, and the revision process that many of you have carried out and sitting out through these tough subjects such as geography is nowhere as easy. I also understand that this is not the most interesting subject that I am making you study, and I'm making you sit for 3.5 hours. It is not the most interesting subject that UPSC has to offer. The effort from our side, including the very qualified subject matter experts, they have relentlessly tried to ease your journey through the process. Yes, there would have been few areas where you might have felt that questions would not have been answered, etc. But overall, the effort has been to make your journey smoother, to help you compete in this examination in the best possible manner, which is possible, right? Now, having said that, again, I want you to take a moment and think about it, where your conceptual level was at the first class and where you stand today. I'm sure, regardless of whatever portion you have covered, you would have added some amount of value to whatever has been covered, whatever portion has been basically done. Some conceptual additions, value additions would have definitely happened. Now you need to revise that, you need to reinforce that, you need to move ahead with that. And even if nothing else, even if, let's say, you do the bare minimum of revising and repeating continuously these particular portions of concepts, we have covered ample portions of current affairs as well, ample portions of conceptual portions as well. So that is something that is going to help you tremendously for the general studies as well as the optional portion, both in the prelims as well as in the mains examination. Okay, so again, big gratitude and thank you from the bottom of my heart. And please always do feel free to get in touch with me. You have my mail ID. Get in touch with me whenever you want. And the mentorship line, etc., is always available for your access as well. Okay. Having said that, when we talk about maps, so what should be the coverage and how should the approach be? So here, in the first session itself, I had told you that the World Atlas, any kind of atlas that you have, please don't be that kind of a candidate or student who likes spending their parents or your own money by buying the newer books all the time. Any atlas that you have will solve the purpose of maps. First of all, please understand, direct map-based questions which are asked is going to be asked only in the prelims, not in the mains examination. For general studies, you don't get map-based question in the mains examination. At max, you might get 1 or 2 map-based questions in the prelims. So how to cover that? How to capture that? That can be captured with a proper coverage of current affairs. So when you study current affairs, and I hope that in all these 24 sessions, I have reinforced this ample number of times that newspaper reading is an absolute must. So when you are covering these current affairs, there, let's say you find a news story regarding the NATO troops pull out from Afghanistan. Look at Afghanistan. Look at the boundary areas of Afghanistan. For example, Russia-Ukraine war is happening. Look at the bordering regions of Ukraine and Russia. For example, you come across a news story that China and Japan, they are indulged in a kind of a border dispute regarding certain islands. What are those? If, let's say, you have Armenia and Azerbaijan at war with each other, and you will read in news stories that they are fighting with each other regarding access and control of a region, Nagorno-Karabakh. Now, Just reading that news story will never solve the purpose. Because you are students of geography, we all are students of geography. So here, it is your prerogative to immediately open up the atlas and know which are the areas where Armenia exists, the bordering areas of Armenia, bordering areas of Azerbaijan. Many of the times, this in itself will give you a clue regarding why is it that Russia is supporting Armenia, why is it that Turkey is supporting Azerbaijan. You will get enough clue about that. So as long as your process is refined, your process is basically very well assimilated to the portion of current affairs, you will benefit at the end of it. Please do not restrict yourself that this is the list of the rivers, this is the list of national parks. Now, yes, many of the students, many of you have an expectation that some angel will come down upon the earth, and that person will make you learn all the national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. Please don't have that kind of an expectation or even an approach. You have more than 600 places which are covered either under national parks or wildlife sanctuaries or biosphere reserves. Learning all of that means you are not learning anything else, you are only focusing upon that. And for what? For one question which can appear every 2 to 3 years in prelims, once a question can be asked. For that, do you need to spend so much time? Absolutely not. Okay, it is not at all required. So that is where always keep in mind the return on investment. Just because UPSC once in 2018 had asked that which are the places situated closest to Delhi in terms of longitude, Hyderabad, Pune, Bangalore, etc., does not mean you start learning longitudinal divisions of the country. UPSC likes playing with the mindset of the candidates like this. UPSC asked this question in 2018. You had a lot of candidates who spent almost close to a month and a half learning the longitudes. UPSC did not ask it again. Similarly, countries from north to south, east to west, you have many people, they learn it from a list. Don't ever do that. When you open an atlas, your approach should be that of explorative. Means what? Explore it. Which are the areas across the world? By this age in your life, it is high time that you should be aware where a particular country is situated. Which are the countries in South America? Which are the countries in Africa? Which are the countries in Europe? You should be aware of that, right? And this is something which is reflected by very simple questions that I throw at you. Many of you bungle up in that because you are not aware where a particular country is situated. That should not happen. So explore it. Think about it as if you are inculcating a newer piece of information. What are the countries in North America? What are the countries in South America? Right? What are the countries in Asia? You should be aware of. If you're not aware of that, how will you be able to understand where is it that India manages to have a trade surplus, international relations, etc.? So always have that explorative approach. If you have a Mediterranean Sea, what are the bordering areas around Mediterranean Sea? You should look at that. If there is a crisis across the Suez Canal connects which water bodies? Where is it and across which country does Suez Canal lie? You should be aware of that. So that is the explorative approach that you need to follow. Please never rely upon a list. Many of the people out there in the coaching industry, they make huge sums of money based upon those candidates who rely upon that list. And eventually a question is not asked from there. So that is where. And for them, it is very easy. Next year, UPSC will ask something different. They will simply make their materials more bulky. It is the candidates who have lost 1 month preparing for that. So again, and when we talk about maps are not something that you can conquer 1 week before your prelims. Make it a habit that almost at least once a week, you open up the atlas, pick up any particular continent in question. Look at those continents. Look at the bordering areas. What are the water bodies around us? right? So that approach, if you follow, guys, I understand it is not the kind of the ideal spoon feeding approach that many of us desire. Even I desire that spoon feeding approach, that somebody comes and tells me what to study. I don't have to work hard for that. It is not that kind of approach, but this is the approach which will be much more sustainable in the long run. It is going to be helpful for you while citing examples when you write the mains exam. When you sit in front of the interview panel, in front of those knowledgeable people, you will get much amount of help from that idea, from that knowledge. Okay, so that is where this will help you improvise your knowledge content in the long run. Okay, I hope that is clear. Thanks, Yuvika. Thanks for the kind words. In mains, joiner, no questions are asked from the map. No. For general studies, no question is asked. Right? Anjali, I have been born and brought up in different parts of the country. I have lived in many different, not all the different states, but in 4 to 5 different states. So that is where it is very hard for me to triangulate where I come from. Okay. Thanks, Vaibhav. So that is where we'll talk about maps, and we'll be talking about the approach to covering these maps. So what I want to convey here, guys, is very simple, that look, when you open up the map, overall the atlas, those of you who are not aware, basically you have two types of map. One is the physical. Alkshendra, significantly. Map will help you significantly in the mains exam. The type of examples that you can cite will be tremendously more. Okay, so physical map. This is the physical map in front of your screen, where you have, for example, the various different areas, various different regions, which are demarcated by the physical features, mountains, plateaus, in those kinds. This is a physical map. Now you have a kind of a map which has boundaries of the country. That is political. This is the political map. So this is also something you should be aware of. But then, because you have studied geography, physical map needs to be commingled and intermingled with the aspect of coverage of political map. That is what is going to give you a lasting knowledge base, a lasting impression as well. Now, how do we cover this? So basically, pick one continent at a time. Let's say you pick Australia, or you pick South America, or you pick North America. One day, open it up. After, let's say, after you have your dinner, when we are not in a mood to study something very new, when our mind is slightly drowsy, or before you are done with the day, you want to go to the bed, or let's say while you're traveling somewhere, while you're going to work or your college, at any point of time, if you pick up in one day one particular continent, observe all the physical features. In one day, it will not happen. It will happen when you repeat it again and again and again. So let me give you an example. Takshashila, no. Aditya, yes, you are correct. So here, when we talk about, let's say, the region of any particular continent which we pick up, here, let's say we pick up the region of North America. Now, how do we cover this? If you have opened up the atlas and you get this particular image in front of you, what to make out of it? What is important for the exam? That is the first question that a candidate faces. So for a brief moment of time, just push that exam perspective out of your mind and start exploring that particular region. Now here, when you take a look at it, basically, first of all, look at the bordering areas. In the bordering regions, look at the water bodies which are present. So cover it in any possible manner. You have Gulf of Mexico, right? This is the Gulf of Mexico, based upon which eventually the ocean current which rises from here is referred to as the Gulf Stream, right? Here you have the region of Florida. Okay, then you have the wide Atlantic Ocean, you have the Labrador Sea. Here you have the Davis Strait, which separates the portion of North America with Greenland. You have the Baffin Bay. Okay, you have the Beaufort Sea. Then you have the Gulf of Alaska. You have the Chukchi Sea. Here you have a Bering Strait, which separates the region of Asia to the region of North America. Okay, then here you have the Gulf of California. Okay, so do this again and again and again, right? So you should be aware of the water bodies first of all. Then, for example, start looking at few of the smaller features. For example, here you have the Yucatan Channel. And Yucatan Channel here means here you have the Yucatan Peninsula as well. Okay. Then after that, here, for example, you have the Hudson Bay. Here you have the Hudson Strait. Right? You have the Gulf of Boothia here. Gulf of Boothia, which exists in that region. Now, after that, look at the mountain ranges. Now, in the mountain ranges, in the region of Alaska, this is the region of Alaska. This is the region of Canada. Right? This is United States. Right? So here, Alaska is also a part of United States. It is estimated that at one point of time, 18,000 years back, when the planet was in the last ice age, this portion of Alaska was connected by the landmass with the portion of Asia. Right? You did not have Bering Strait at that point of time because the sea water and the sea level was low because of the ice age. So it is estimated and expected that it would have been because of this connectivity that people would have migrated all the way from Asia to America, and that is how the region of Americas would have been populated eventually. Okay, so here, Alaska, you have the Alaska Range, and you also have the Brooks Range. Here you have Mount Denali. One of the highest peaks in North America is Mount Denali. I hope this is visible to you guys. Okay? Yes. Now, here, after this, observe something. You will observe that the region of Canada, northern portion of Canada, it is deeply indented. Right? It has got indentions in significant portions of it. You have water incoming in these areas. Now, this has happened again in the glacial cycle. When you had large glaciers moving in that area during the last ice age, that is when these areas have been eroded, and the areas have been eroded to such a level that water has come in. These glaciers, they have also carried out large-scale deposits of very fertile till and very fertile material in that entire region, which we refer to as the Great Plains. Can I rub the portion up till here? Is it okay? Yes. Perfect. So here, you will find the Great Plains in existence. These Great Plains are amongst the most fertile regions in North America and also across the globe. It is these Great Plains where you do experience a lot of tornadoes which get created. The maximum number of tornadoes across the globe, they get created in this region. These are large plain areas, featureless almost, very fertile. This is where corn is grown in maize is grown in large quantums. And the glaciers, the glacial activities have also ended up creating these large lakes, the 5 lakes. What are those 5 lakes? You have 5 lakes. Yes, Holmes, good. Lake Huron, Ontario, then you have Lake Michigan, then you have Lake Erie, and Lake Superior. Right? So that is the aspect of these 5 lakes. So this is again glacial origin. You also have Lake Winnipeg. It is situated here. Now, on the eastern edge of North America, you find one of the old fold mountains, that is the Appalachian Mountains. Now, Appalachian Mountains, has been created when? Around 250 and 260 million years back, when you had North America colliding with Europe. As of now, North America is moving away from Europe. But then at one point of time when Atlantic was not in existence, North America collided with Europe, creating the Appalachian Mountains. These are very, very rich in mineral resources. Now, obviously, much has been eroded, so that is why the minerals are coming to the surface. So this region of Appalachian and the Ozark Plateau that you see, Ozark is the ideal example of a Piedmont Plateau. That is immediately to the foothills of the mountains. That is where you have the Ozark Plateau. So that is where you have large areas under or very rich mineral deposits. You here have very good grade of coal, the grade of coal that is not available in India. In this region, carbonification process is said to have initiated close to around 300 to 350 million years back. So very good grade coal, great amount of iron ore deposits, all of that you find in this region. Now, furthermore, when we talk about the Rockies, these are the Rocky Mountains. These have also been created as a result of the process of oceanic continental convergence. Now, this oceanic continental convergence means that on the continental side, fold will happen. Also, you have frequent eruptions. So, many older volcanoes you'll be able to find in this area. Then, here you would be able to see coast mountains, coast ranges. Right? Cascade ranges, coast ranges, that is something you will find here. These are the youngest fold mountains across the globe. Here, the folding is said to have initiated very, very recently. Again, when I say very recently, around 2 million years back, that is when the folding is said to have happened. So this is very recent. Okay. Then after that, here you have the Mackenzie Range. Here you have one of the largest rivers in that region of Alaska, that is the Yukon River. That exists in the northern portion of the coast ranges. Right? Now, after that, here you will find the existence of larger rivers. So you have the rivers Missouri, then you have the river Mississippi. Missouri eventually ends up meeting Mississippi, right? These are the large rivers here. Then you have Rio Grande, which forms for a certain distance a border between United States and Mexico. You also have St. Lawrence, which exists in this northern area, which forms in some part boundary between Canada and United States. Then here you have the Colorado River. It is across this where you have one of the across River Colorado, you have one of the very unique physical features which is known world over. What is it? Good, very good. The Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon exists in that region. Okay, all of you who are asking repeatedly, tomorrow is a holiday, guys. Today marks the end of the session. Tomorrow is a holiday. However, we will have the prelims test discussion from around 5 to 8 p.m. All the various faculties will be taking that. Having said that, tomorrow we don't have a BHLP class. Okay? Right? I hope that is clear. The plains in US, these are the Great Plains in US, which is also referred to as the Corn Belt. Here you have the Great Salt Lake, very saline. Then you have the region around Sierra Nevada. Here you have the desert, the Utah desert in this region. Okay. Then after that, further south that you come, here you have the Sierra Madre Occidental, that is the western portion of it, and you have the Sierra Madre Oriental, that is the eastern. Oriental always refers to something which lies on the east. Occidental always refers to something which lies in the west. Here you have the Mexican Plateau. Many of the old mountains and volcanic peaks, they do exist in this region. All the various examples that we gave regarding volcanic eruptions, be it the region of Shasta, Hood, Rainier, all of them exist across the western part. Okay? Now, after that, here, if you move south, here you have the Yucatan Peninsula. Okay? Here you find the Canadian Shield. In this region, you find the Canadian Shield. Shield means what? A kind of an old volcanic landform where you have a flattish surface. This is going to be very, very rich in minerals. So you do find mineral deposits in this region where you have iron ore, uranium, nickel, gold, etc. All of that you end up finding in this region. Now, in the coastal areas around here, Florida, you have a large wetland, which is referred to as the Florida Everglades. This is a large wetland in this region. Okay? Then copper is also found into that areas. Now, in this entire region across the western part, you have significant deposits of copper, lead, zinc, silver. Some amount of gold is also found in this region. Okay? Khushi, you have the Utah desert in that region. Plateaus, basically you have here the Colorado Plateau. That is where upliftment, epirogenic upliftment has happened, which has created that Grand Canyon. Then you have the Ozark Plateau. These are the major plateaus. Colorado Plateau is also very, very rich in these mineral deposits that I have told about. Okay? Wheat Yubica is grown in the region of the Great Plains as well as the coastal plains in general, but mostly in the Great Plains. Forests are present, Vaidehi. They are mostly present. You have the temperate evergreen forests, which are found across these coast ranges all the way, stretching from here all the way to here. Across the region of Sierra Madre Occidental, you also have the Chihuahua Desert in Mexico. So this is the desert land. Okay? Right. Prairies, the prairies exist in to the south of the Great Plains and here. This is where the prairies are in existence. They also extend all the way to the north of Edwards Plateau as well. Amazon River is not in North America, guys. I hope that is something which is clear. Okay, so this is how Texas is a state in United States. El Paso is in Texas, the boundary between Mexico and United States. Okay, so this is how you have to cover a particular continent. For example, when we talk about, let's say, the region of South America. Now, South America, again, a very simple continent to cover overall if you have an idea about the number of countries. So I would always advise you that look at the political map simultaneously in the case of South America. Not all the international ports should be remembered. Not all the international ports are important as well. So that is something which is not very important. Tomorrow is a holiday, guys, because of Guru Nanak Jayanti. So that is why tomorrow is a holiday. Okay. Why minerals are found in eastern US? That is because it is a very old landmass. Older landmass where you have hard rocks, there you do find mineral deposits. Bhumi, it is included in North America. All the Caribbean islands that you see, the Greater Antilles, that will be included in the region of North America. Okay? Now, in South America, thanks, Aparna. In the South America, Yucatan Peninsula is here. Okay. In South America, you will find a similar pattern where on the west, you have a kind of a fold mountain come volcanic eruption. So here you have the Andes. The Andes stretch across the western margin of South America. Now remember when we talked about the continental oceanic convergence, here you also have a very deep trench, that is the Peru-Chile trench, which exists in this region. You have Mount Aconcagua, which is the highest peak in the region of South America. Then Chimborazo, another important peak here. Now here you will find the Patagonian Peninsula. Okay. Pampas, these are basically, Patagonia is also rich in minerals. Pampas, these are again temperate grasslands. You have a lot of volcanic eruptions in Andes. Yes, that is true. Volcanic eruption in Andes is because of oceanic continental convergence. Cotopaxi, these are examples of the eruption. Okay. Now here, if you take a look at the countries, Chile, Bolivia, Argentina, very, very rich in mineral deposits. Rare earth minerals such as lithium are found in significant quantums in this. It is also what is referred to as the lithium triangle. Okay. Here is where you have the Amazon basin, the large Amazon river drains through this area. And here you will find very dense forests, evergreen forests in that entire region, which are also referred to as selvas. These are basically when we talk about the dense forests which are present in this region. Okay. Now, after this, here you have the Brazilian highlands, again very rich in terms of mineral deposits. Significant amount of minerals are present here. Here you will have the Atacama Desert in this region. Atacama Desert is in Chile. That is where you have the large Atacama Desert also. Now, Across the entire region of South America, you will find two major highlands. One is the Brazilian highlands, other is the Guyana highlands. These are the large plateau areas. Patagonian Peninsular region is also made up of the plateau regions significantly. You also have significant amount of mineral deposits in this region. So in mineral deposits, Brazilian highlands, they are very, very rich in mineral deposits. Why it is referred to as lithium triangle? Because it is very, very rich in mineral reserves. Okay. In India, Amrendra, lithium has been found in the Mandya district of Karnataka near Ramnagar. So that is where in India recently lithium deposits have been found. Okay. Utkarsh, how do we come to know which are the important components in a continent? So that is what I'm trying to tell you guys, that when you come across these particular, let's say, markings, try to explore about it slightly if you can. If not, at least the countries and their bordering areas, that is something which you should be aware of. Okay? Right. Now, Chile, for example, has got the largest deposit of copper. It is the largest exporter of copper. Peru is also very rich in copper as well as tin deposits in general. Okay, that is something which you find in the case of Peru as well. Pampas, I hope you are aware, these are temperate grasslands. Tin in Brazil, Peru, Argentina, you will find significant amount of tin deposits. Now here you have grasslands, you have the savanna grasslands in these areas, which are referred to as llanos. In Venezuela, in Brazil, these grasslands are referred to as campos. Look at the World Climatic Classification. We have discussed that. Okay, so this is about the region of South America. Okay, I hope that is clear. Abhay, how to remember all these things? Repetition. The more you repeat, the better you get at it. Here you have the Falkland Islands, where the very famous Falkland War happened, which propelled the Prime Minister of UK, Margaret Thatcher, into another term. So this is where the Falkland Islands came in. And she had launched at that point of time a very famous military exercise with the name, and the famous name was Operation Goa. So that is where you have the India connection to it. And you had aircraft carrier, which was used by Britain to capture this Falkland Islands. And that aircraft carrier was later taken by Indian Navy, and Indian Navy used it for a long period of time before decommissioning it very recently. Okay, so this is where you have the aspect of South America. Okay. Now, after this, we come to the portion of Europe. Now, in the region of Europe, you have again fold mountains which are significantly present, and just like in the region of Canada, here also you will find that you have a significant presence of glacial landforms, in the sense of you have a lot of erosion which has been carried out during the last glacial cycle. So a lot of indentions to be found in the region around Norway. Okay. Now here you have Svalbard, by the way. Svalbard. What is Svalbard famous for? Svalbard is famous as a seed reserve. Across the globe, the important seeds, all the various different varieties of seeds, they are stored in Svalbard. Here you have the Kola Peninsula, where you have the deepest hole which has been dug by mankind, which is around 10 to 12 kilometers deep from the surface. That is where you have the Kola Peninsula. Look at the water bodies again. you have the Kara Sea, Barents Sea, White Sea. It is Gulf of Bothnia, which is different from Gulf of Boothia in the case of North America. Then you have the Baltic Sea, the countries of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. That is why they are referred to as Baltic states. Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, they are referred to as Baltic states. Here you have the Scandinavian ranges. That is why the countries Norway, Sweden, and Finland, they are also referred to as Scandinavian countries in general. These are including Denmark, these are also referred to as Nordic countries after the Nord race which lived here. Then here you have the North Sea. You have the narrow English Channel which separates United Kingdom from the remaining portion of Europe. Here you have the Pyrenees. Okay, here you have again a kind of a plateau that is referred to as the Iberian Peninsula. This Iberian Peninsula is separated from Africa by a water body that is the Strait of Gibraltar. It is at this Strait of Gibraltar where UK has got a very important military base. It is at this Strait of Gibraltar where during World War I, Winston Churchill, while he was in the Navy, suffered a significant drawback as well. Okay? Then, from the region of Pyrenees all the way till Ural Mountains that you see. Ural Mountains are the ones along with Caucasus Mountains which separates Europe from Asia. Otherwise, they are connected over land. So from the region of Pyrenees all the way till the Ural Mountains, you have the Great European Plain. Now, many portions of it are below sea level. This is very, very fertile. It is here in this plain area that you have the Great Wheat Belt in that entire region around Ukraine, all the way extending into Asia. You have significant growth of wheat. Okay, here observe this across Black Sea. This is the Crimean Peninsula. This is where you have Crimea, which was annexed by Russia almost around 8 years back. Then here you have the Alps mountain ranges. Here you have the Balkans. So all the countries in this region, they are also referred to as the Balkans, Balkan state. It is here that you have the Balkans. Near Balkans, you have the mountain range, which are also referred to as Dinaric Alps. Okay, it is in this region across the Rhone and the Rhine River where you have significant amount of, and all the Western Europe, you have significant amount of coal and iron ore deposits, which was very instrumental in bringing about a kind of industrialization of Europe that is present to the western portion of Alps in general. Okay. Russia-Ukraine war, Vanshika, is going on in this area. This is where Russia is pushing. That is why Belarus and its support to Russia, that also came into question. And that is where Turkey is playing a significant role as a mediator, as a negotiator. Okay. So this is about Europe. Europe has got multiple different peninsulas. You have the Iberian Peninsula, you have the Scandinavian Peninsula here, and here also you have a kind of a peninsula which exists. Okay. To the south of Europe, you have the Mediterranean Sea. Here you will be able to observe something that is referred to as an Aegean Sea. Aegean Sea. This is said to be a remnant of the ancient Tethys Sea. Okay, that is what is the Aegean Sea. Okay. Now, then Africa. In the case of Africa, you have the Fold Atlas Mountains in the north, separated by Strait of Gibraltar from Europe. Right here, you will find the Great Sahara Desert extending large largely from east to west. Okay, here you will have the Red Sea. So the Suez Canal is the one which connects Red Sea with the Mediterranean Sea. To the south of Sahara, you have the Sahel region. You have the Sahel region to the south of Sahara. Sahel acts as a kind of a transition to the grasslands which lies to the south. So that is a kind of an interconnecting area. You have the Ethiopian highlands. This is the Horn of Africa. This is also referred to as Somali Peninsula. This is where Somalia lies. So those of you who ask that what is Somalia, this is where Somalia does lie. Okay. Now, here you have one of the largest rivers in Africa, that is Niger, which extends all the way here. Here you have the mouth of river Niger. Now, then you have the Congo Basin, densely forested with evergreen forests. And here you have the Great Rift Valley across Lake Victoria, one of the largest lakes, Lake Tanganyika, extending all the way here. This is where the African plate is splitting. Okay. Now, after that, Pyrenees is a, yes, you have received the answer, right? Gulf of Karabagaz is in the region of Caspian Sea, Amrendra. Okay. Now, here you have, look at this, the Lake Tanganyika, Lake Victoria, all of them are a part of the Great Rift Valley. This is where the African continent is going to split into two. Here you have an escarpment in the form of Drakensberg. Again, very rich in minerals. Diamond is also found. Then you have the Katanga Plateau, significantly rich in iron, zinc, copper, and tin. So copper, tin, and zinc are in large quantums. Copper, tin, zinc, these are present in large numbers. Okay? Right. Then, after that, you have the Namib and the Kalahari Desert, because you have a cold ocean current in this region, which is the cold ocean current which moves to the west of Africa, which is the one. Let me see. Good. You have the Beniguela current. Peru current, why will it move near Africa? Peru current moves to the west of South America. Okay. Now, this is about Africa in general. Africa, significant amount of biodiversity is going to be present to the south of Congo Basin, in the region of Kenya as well. Mount Kenya is one of the extinct volcanoes that you have, not exactly extinct, but dormant. Then here you have the Masai Mara region, very rich in larger animals. The Masai Mara area extends all the way from here. Okay, so this is where you have the region of Africa. Furthermore, when we talk about Asia, Asia is something which is significantly larger, and here start from the region of Sea of Okhotsk. That is where you have the Kamchatka Peninsula. To the west of Bering Sea, very, very rich in oil reserves, Sea of Okhotsk and Kamchatka Peninsula. In the region of Africa, you'll find oil reserves significantly in the northern region of Algeria, in the region of Libya. Large amount of oil deposits you find in this area. Okay. Now, after that, here you have the Sea of Japan. This is where you have Japan. And observe, basically, you have the Kuril Trench and the Japan Trench, indicating an oceanic continental convergence in this area. Okay. Then you have the Yellow Sea. That is where the famous Yellow River, which is Huanghe, that drains there. It is named yellow because of the yellowish sediment it carries. Why does it carry yellowish sediments? It carries these sediments from the lowest plains in the western portion of China. Okay, here you have the cold Gobi Desert, okay, Caucasus and the Ural Mountains. They separate Asia from Africa. Okay, so this is basically the region. So observe here, Volga, it drains into the Caspian Sea. So that is why Caspian in the upper portion has lesser salinity, where Caspian in the lower portion, that has got very high salinity. You have Lake Baikal, which is made up of fresh water, but here also at the deeper portions, you don't have significant amount of biodiversity, which is prevalent. Okay. Now, how to connect it with the political map? So, for example, observe here you have the Suez Canal. So, Suez Canal lies in which country? In Egypt. Here you have the big Sinai Peninsula. It is across this Sinai Peninsula where you have the Gaza Strip, and the entire region has been indulged in and involved in war multiple number of times between Israel and the Arab nations. Here you have the Red Sea. Okay, so when you take the case of, let's say, Mediterranean Sea, look at the bordering regions of the Mediterranean Sea, which are the areas which border the Mediterranean Sea in that region. So you have Egypt, you have Turkey. Okay, so Turkey, if you will observe, Turkey is the one which partly lies in the region of Europe and partly lies in the region of Asia. Then here you have the region of Caspian. Okay, here you have the region of Iran, desert area of Iran, Daste Lut. Another desert in the region is Daste Kavir. These are the large desert areas in Iran. You have the Zagros Mountains here. Okay, here you have the Euphrates and the Tigris River. When you read in history about the Mesopotamian civilization thrived across the banks of Tigris and Euphrates. The ancient Byzantine Empire also thrived in the region around this area. So this area has had a history of various different civilizations. Then you have one of the large deserts, that is Rub al Khali. That is the desert present in the region of Saudi Arabia. And basically here you have the Persian Gulf. Okay, all the oil transportation from the Arab regions happens from the Persian Gulf. Here you have the very narrow Strait of Hormuz. This Strait of Hormuz is the one which is very important for oil transport. And very close to Strait of Hormuz, you have the Bandar Abbas port, very famous Bandar Abbas port of Iran. India is trying to build the Chabahar port in Iran here. Okay, this is your River Nile. So River Nile, again, it has got two head streams, White Nile, Blue Nile. Both of them end up joining River Nile. Here is where you had the great Egyptian civilization, okay, across the banks of River Nile. This is where you have the Bab al Mandeb, which ends up joining Gulf of Aden to Red Sea. Okay, so Suez Canal connects Mediterranean Sea to Red Sea. Bab al Mandeb connects Red Sea to, let's say, Gulf of Aden. And you have Strait of Hormuz, which connects Persian Gulf to the Arabian Sea. Okay, this is where Somalia is present. Okay. Then Australia, for example, large sections of Australia, they have very less population. Why? Because of the large or the Great Victorian Desert across the western part of the country. Okay, here you will find Lake Erie. This is a monsoonal lake where the lake grows to become 5 times its size during the monsoon season, and again during the dry season the size decreases quite significantly. Here you have the Great Dividing Range on the on the eastern part. Okay. You have rivers Murray and Darling as the major rivers in Australia. You have River Murray and River Darling. Here you have Gulf of Carpentaria. Gulf of Carpentaria, one of the largest seas in terms of continental shelf region. Then Great Barrier Reef, made up of corals. Then you have the Bass Strait, which separates Tasmania from Australia. You have the Tasman Sea in this area. Okay. And then basically you have the Great Australian Bight in this region. Okay. Now, much of the agricultural productivity that you find in the case of Australia is either across the Murray-Darling Basin or across the plains to the south and some part in the east. This is the portion in the north which is impacted by monsoon and tropical cyclones quite significantly. Why that name is Darling? Well, the answer that you are expecting is not the answer. So that is where I will be disappointing you. Oceania is basically the portion of New Zealand, the region of Australia, all of that, along with the islands, they are referred to as Oceania. Okay? Right. Now, coming to our own country, India. Here again, I would urge you, I would plead you, I would request you with folded hands, please look at it as a point of current affairs. Kirubagar, do we need to learn all of this? No. But many of you have had this complaint that we have not covered the world mineral resource distribution. That is why I wanted for this to be covered, but not very important for general studies overall. Okay. Right. Why states in Africa divided by straight line? Vatsal, it has got, when you read history, ping your or poke your faculty with this question. It has got a kind of the historical origin to it, because when you have the countries getting divided on the paper, that is when always it is done on a straight line. So that is where Australia, or rather Africa, amongst the various colonial powers, when it was divided amongst themselves so as to prevent conflict in Europe, what they did was they divided Africa. So it has got a very good historical analogy to it. Okay. So this is about, now when we talk about India, here you have to understand that political map of India, you have to cover in the portions of states, right? States and state boundaries. For example, take any particular state such as Telangana. How many different states share its boundary with Telangana? So you have Karnataka, you have Maharashtra, you have Chhattisgarh, you have Andhra Pradesh, right? This is something you should be aware of. For example, West Bengal, how many international boundaries does it share? It shares with Bangladesh, Nepal, and Bhutan. Arunachal Pradesh, with Bhutan, with Tibet, that is China, as well as with Myanmar. So that is how you should be aware of the states. This is where, guys, I tell you, you have to be explorative. See, I can give you a list. I will, with the help of the SMEs, I can furnish a list. I will tell the SMEs to give you a list that this is the state bordering this. There is no point learning it at all. You will defy the very reason, very purpose why UPSC is searching and what UPSC is searching for. So please don't rely on the list, guys. Explore it on your own. Start with your own state. Look at your own state and start moving outwards. That is how you end up covering that region. Okay, I hope that this is something I'm able to make sense. Web of maritime boundary is there, but I'm talking about the international boundaries with countries. Haryana, take a look at Yuvraj. In Haryana, you take the case of what are the boundary regions. Now, if a question which UPSC had asked that if you have to travel from Kohima to Kottayam, how many minimum number of states do you need to cover? So in that, you need to be aware where Kohima is situated, Nagaland, where Kottayam is situated, Kerala, right? No amount of teaching can help you learn all the regions or the areas which are situated. That you have to do on your own. And